You have arrived here perhaps driven by a question that gnaws at the edges of your consciousness, or perhaps because something in your soul has stirred at the recognition of a truth too uncomfortable for the modern mind to accept. If you have come seeking easy answers or gentle reassurances, then know this: we do not gather here to speak of comfort or consolation. No, we are gathered to invoke the ancient wisdom that dwells beneath what our softened age naively calls suffering. When I speak of pain, I do not speak of the melodramatic anguish that fills social media feeds or the therapeutic complaints that echo through self-help seminars. I speak of something far more profound, far more transformative. I speak of the crucible through which human character is forged, the anvil upon which the soul is hammered into something worthy of its own existence. And that process, dear listener, is never gentle. The Stoics understood what we have forgotten in our pursuit of perpetual ease, that power without pain is an illusion, that strength without struggle is a fantasy, and that wisdom without wounds is mere intellectual decoration. They knew that the path to true mastery begins not with comfort, but with confrontation, not with avoidance, but with acceptance of the very forces that would break lesser spirits. Picture, if you will, a blacksmith's forge in the depths of winter. The metal lies cold, brittle, useless in its current state. Only when it is thrust into the flames, only when it endures the hammer's relentless blows, does it transform into something of value, a blade that can cut through deception, a tool that can shape reality itself. The metal does not choose this process, but without it, it remains nothing more than raw ore, potential nihilized. You are that metal. Your pain is that fire, and the choice before you is whether to embrace the forge or remain forever in your brittle, untempered state. But understand this clearly. The pain I speak of is not random suffering, not the chaotic misery that befalls the unthinking masses who stumble through existence without purpose or direction. No, the pain that builds power is chosen pain, conscious pain, the deliberate embrace of difficulty in service of something greater than immediate comfort. It is the pain of discipline when laziness beckons, the pain of truth when lies would be easier, the pain of growth when stagnation feels safe. The ancient Stoics called this concept the discipline of desire, though they might not have recognized the modern terminology. They understood that every moment of your existence presents you with a fundamental choice. Will you choose the path of least resistance, the gentle slope that leads nowhere? Or will you choose the steep ascent that demands everything but offers transformation in return? Consider Marcus Aurelius, writing in his private journal while campaigns raged around him, while the weight of empire pressed upon his shoulders like a mountain of responsibility. He did not write of his comfort or his ease. He wrote of his struggles, his failures, his constant battle to align his actions with his principles. Each page of his meditations reveals a man who understood that true power comes not from avoiding hardship, but from meeting it with unwavering resolve. Listen to his words echoing across the centuries. He speaks not of happiness, but of duty, not of pleasure, but of purpose, not of avoiding pain, but of using it as a teacher. This was a man who had access to every comfort the Roman Empire could provide, yet he chose the harder path, the path of philosophical reflection, of moral discipline, of conscious growth through conscious struggle. But why does pain hold such transformative power? Why is it that comfort breeds weakness, while hardship forges strength? The answer lies in understanding the fundamental nature of human psychology, the deep architecture of how consciousness itself develops and evolves. When you exist in a state of perpetual comfort, when every desire is immediately satisfied and every discomfort is quickly eliminated, your mind grows soft, your will becomes flabby, your character remains undeveloped like a muscle that has never been exercised. You become like a plant grown in a greenhouse, beautiful perhaps, but fragile, unable to withstand the natural forces of existence. Pain, on the other hand, forces adaptation. It demands that you develop new capacities, that you discover resources within yourself you never knew existed, that you transcend the limitations you once thought were permanent. Every time you choose to endure rather than escape, to persist rather than quit, to face rather than flee, you are literally rewiring your neural pathways, creating new patterns of response that serve you far beyond the immediate situation. This is not mere philosophy. This is neuroscience, psychology, and ancient wisdom converging on a single truth. The human brain is designed to grow through challenge, to strengthen through stress, to evolve through adversity. The very structure of your nervous system rewards you for pushing beyond your comfort zone, flooding your consciousness with neurochemicals that enhance learning, memory, and resilience. But here is where most people misunderstand the relationship between pain and power. They imagine that any suffering automatically leads to growth, that being a victim of circumstance somehow qualifies as spiritual development. This is a dangerous delusion. Random suffering, unconscious pain, the mere experience of hardship without purpose or direction. These things do not build power. They build bitterness, resentment, and weakness disguised as wisdom. The pain that transforms is chosen pain, conscious pain, pain embraced with full awareness of its purpose and potential. It is the athlete who chooses to train when their body screams for rest, knowing that each repetition builds not just muscle but character. It is the entrepreneur who chooses to risk everything on a vision that others cannot see, knowing that the fear of failure is the price of potential greatness. It is the artist who chooses to create something true rather than something popular, knowing that authenticity often comes at the cost of approval. This distinction is crucial because it reveals the fundamental difference between those who use pain as a path to power and those who are merely crushed by it. The difference lies not in the intensity of the suffering, but in the relationship to it, not in the magnitude of the challenge, but in the consciousness brought to bear upon it. The Stoics developed specific practices for cultivating this conscious relationship with difficulty. They called it negative visualization, the deliberate contemplation of loss, hardship, and death, not as morbid obsession, but as preparation for reality. They understood that by mentally rehearsing challenges before they arrived, by imagining themselves stripped of everything they held dear, they could develop the inner resources necessary to meet actual hardship with equanimity. But this was not mere mental exercise. It was training for the fundamental fact of human existence, that life will test you, that circumstances will challenge you, that pain will find you whether you seek it or not. The only question is whether you will meet these inevitable challenges as a prepared warrior or as a surprised victim. This preparation begins with understanding that your relationship to pain determines its effect upon you. The same experience that destroys one person can empower another. The same setback that creates a victim can forge a victor. The same loss that breeds despair can generate determination. The difference lies entirely in how you choose to interpret and respond to what happens to you. Viktor Frankl, surviving the horrors of concentration camps, discovered this truth in its most extreme form. Stripped of everything, family, freedom, dignity, hope, he found that even in the most dehumanizing circumstances, one thing remained within his control: his attitude toward his situation. This inner freedom, this capacity to choose your response regardless of your circumstances, became the foundation for everything he would later teach about human resilience and meaning. But you do not need to wait for extreme circumstances to begin this training. Every day presents you with countless opportunities to choose the harder path, to embrace necessary discomfort, to use minor irritations as practice for major challenges. The person who can tolerate waiting in line will not withstand genuine hardship. The individual who cannot delay gratification for an hour will not persist through years of difficulty. Power, you see, is not about dominating others or accumulating external resources. True power is internal, the capacity to remain centered in chaos, to maintain your values under pressure, to act according to your principles regardless of the cost. This kind of power cannot be given to you or taken from you. It can only be developed through the conscious embrace of difficulty, the deliberate choice to grow through challenge rather than shrink from it. The ancient Stoics understood this so deeply that they built their entire philosophy around it. They did not seek to eliminate pain from human experience, but to transform the human relationship to pain itself. They recognized that suffering is inevitable, but that how you suffer, whether you suffer consciously or unconsciously, with purpose or without meaning, as a path to growth or a reason for despair, this choice remains forever within your control. And it is precisely this choice that separates those who discover genuine power from those who remain forever at the mercy of their circumstances. The weak seek to avoid all discomfort and thus remain weak. The wise seek to use discomfort as a teacher and thus grow strong. The difference between these two approaches is not philosophical. It is practical, measurable, transformative. This transformation does not happen overnight, nor does it occur through grand gestures or dramatic revelations. No, the forging of power through pain is a daily practice, a moment-by-moment choice to lean into discomfort rather than flee from it. It is built through 1,000 small decisions, each one seemingly insignificant, yet collectively forming the foundation of an unshakable inner fortress. Consider the morning when your alarm pierces the darkness and every fiber of your being screams for 5 more minutes of warmth beneath the covers. This moment, this precise instant of choice, contains within it the entire philosophy we speak of. Will you surrender to the immediate comfort, or will you rise and meet the day with intention? The person who conquers that moment conquers something far greater than sleep. They conquer the part of themselves that would keep them small, comfortable, and ultimately powerless. The Stoics knew that character is not built in moments of ease, but in moments of resistance. They understood that every time you choose difficulty over comfort, you are casting a vote for the person you wish to become. These votes accumulate like compound interest, building momentum that eventually becomes unstoppable. But the inverse is equally true. Every surrender to ease, every capitulation to comfort, every retreat from necessary hardship casts a vote for mediocrity, for weakness, for a life lived at the mercy of circumstances. There is a particular quality of pain that the ancients prized above all others, the suffering that befalls the unconscious, but the deliberate dispain of discipline. This is not the random comfort chosen by those who understand that all of life's greatest rewards lie on the far side of resistance. The pain of waking before dawn to train your body, the pain of studying when entertainment beckons, the pain of saving money when immediate pleasures call, the pain of speaking truth when lies would be more convenient. This disciplined pain serves as an inoculation against the chaos that inevitably comes. When you have trained yourself to choose hardship consciously, you develop an immunity to the hardships that choose you. The person who has never voluntarily embraced discomfort will crumble when involuntary discomfort arrives. But the individual who has made pain their teacher will find strength they never knew they possessed when life tests them beyond their imagined limits. But here lies a trap that ensnares many who begin this path: the romanticization of suffering itself. They begin to believe that pain is inherently noble, that struggle automatically confers virtue, that the mere experience of hardship grants them wisdom or status. This is a dangerous delusion that leads not to power, but to a different kind of weakness, the weakness of those who suffer without purpose, who endure without growth, who mistake endurance for enlightenment. The pain that builds power is always purposeful pain, conscious pain, pain embraced in service of something greater than the ego's desire for comfort or recognition. It is not the masochistic pursuit of hardship for its own sake, but the intelligent application of difficulty as a tool for transformation. The difference is as vast as the distance between the athlete who trains with purpose and the individual who simply punishes their body without direction. This purposeful engagement with difficulty requires what the Stoics called prosoche, a constant vigilance, an unwavering attention to the present moment and the choices it contains. Every situation, no matter how mundane, becomes an opportunity to practice this discipline. The traffic jam becomes a chance to practice patience. The difficult conversation becomes a laboratory for courage. The financial setback becomes a gymnasium for resilience. In my years of studying human transformation, I have observed that those who develop genuine power share a common characteristic. They have learned to see obstacles not as barriers, but as raw material. They possess an alchemical vision that transmutes lead into gold, that transforms resistance into strength, that converts setbacks into setups for greater achievements. This is not positive thinking or naive optimism. It is a fundamental shift in perception that recognizes adversity as the universe's way of offering advanced education. The weak see a problem and ask, "Why is this happening to me?" The powerful see the same problem and ask, "How is this happening for me?" This simple shift in questioning changes everything. It transforms you from a victim of circumstances into an architect of character. It converts you from someone who is acted upon by life into someone who acts upon life, even when, especially when, life seems to be acting against you. But this transformation demands more than intellectual understanding. It requires what I call the courage of discomfort, the willingness to sit with unpleasant sensations, difficult emotions, and challenging circumstances without immediately seeking escape. Most people, when confronted with discomfort, instinctively reach for some form of relief: distraction, substance, entertainment, blame, fantasy. These escapes provide temporary reprieve, but permanent weakness. The path of power requires learning to sit in the fire without being consumed by it. It means developing the capacity to feel fear without being paralyzed, to experience anger without being controlled by it, to face uncertainty without being overwhelmed by it. This is not about becoming emotionless. Quite the opposite. It is about developing such a deep relationship with your inner world that no external force can destabilize your core. The ancient philosophers spoke of ataraxia, a state of inner tranquility that remains undisturbed regardless of external circumstances. This is not the peace of those who have avoided conflict, but the profound calm of those who have walked through the fire so many times that they no longer fear the flames. It is earned serenity, purchased with the currency of conscious struggle. I have witnessed this transformation in countless individuals who have chosen the harder path. There is something unmistakable about those who have forged themselves in the furnace of purposeful difficulty. They carry themselves differently. They speak with a quiet authority that cannot be faked. They possess a centeredness that no external force can shake. They have discovered what the Stoics knew, that true power is not the ability to control your circumstances, but the capacity to remain uncontrolled by them. This power manifests in ways both subtle and profound. It appears in the entrepreneur who faces business failure not with despair, but with determination. It emerges in the parent who maintains patience despite exhaustion. It reveals itself in the leader who makes unpopular but necessary decisions. It shows up in the individual who chooses integrity when corruption would be easier. These are not grand gestures that make headlines. They are the quiet victories that build character, one decision at a time. The cultivation of this power requires understanding that pain and pleasure are not opposites, but partners in the dance of human development. Pleasure without the backdrop of pain becomes meaningless. Comfort without the memory of discomfort loses its sweetness. The person who has never been hungry cannot truly appreciate food. The individual who has never been cold cannot fully value warmth. The soul that has never struggled cannot comprehend strength. This is why the Stoics advocated for voluntary hardship, even in times of abundance. They would sleep on hard floors when soft beds were available, eat simple food when delicacies beckoned, walk when carriages were offered. This was not asceticism for its own sake, but training for the inevitable moments when comfort would not be a choice. They understood that the time to develop strength is not when you need it, but before you need it. The modern world, in its relentless pursuit of ease and convenience, has forgotten this wisdom. We have created a culture that promises happiness without struggle, success without sacrifice, growth without pain. These promises are not just false, they are destructive. They create generations of individuals who are psychologically unprepared for the fundamental realities of existence, who crumble at the first sign of genuine difficulty because they have never learned that difficulty can be a doorway rather than a dead end. But you who have found your way to these words, you who sense that there is something more to life than the endless pursuit of comfort, you have the opportunity to choose differently. You can decide to embrace the ancient path, the difficult path, the path that leads not around obstacles, but through them. You can choose to see pain not as punishment, but as preparation, not as evidence of life's cruelty, but as proof of life's desire to make you stronger than you ever imagined possible. This choice, this fundamental decision to embrace difficulty as a teacher, rather than avoid it as an enemy, requires what the ancients called the discipline of perception. You must train your mind to see beyond the immediate discomfort to the deeper transformation occurring beneath the surface. When you choose to speak truth in a room full of lies, you feel the sharp sting of isolation. But beneath that surface pain, something profound is happening. Your spine is straightening. Your voice is finding its true register. Your soul is remembering what it means to stand upright in a world that rewards bending. The Stoics understood that most human suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our interpretations of those events. The rain that ruins your picnic is neither good nor bad. It simply is. The traffic that delays your arrival carries no moral weight. It exists without judgment. The criticism that stings your ego bears no inherent truth about your worth. It is merely sound waves arranged in patterns that you choose to receive as wounds or as information. But here lies the profound responsibility that comes with this understanding. If your suffering is largely a product of your perception, then your power to transform that suffering lies entirely within your grasp. You are not a leaf blown by the winds of circumstance, but a tree that can choose how deeply to root itself, how firmly to stand, how gracefully to bend without breaking. Consider the difference between two individuals facing identical setbacks. One sees failure and retreats into bitterness, blame, and victimhood. The other sees feedback and advances into learning, adaptation, and growth. The external circumstances are identical, but the internal responses create entirely different realities. One person's setback becomes another's setup. One individual's ending becomes another's beginning. The same event that destroys one soul forges another. This is not mere philosophy. This is the practical mechanics of human transformation. Every moment of your existence, you are choosing which story to tell yourself about what is happening to you. Is this experience happening to you or for you? Is this challenge evidence of your inadequacy or proof of life's faith in your capacity to grow? Is this pain a sign that you should quit or a signal that you are approaching something important? The narratives you construct around your experiences become the architecture of your reality. Tell yourself stories of victimhood, and you will live as a victim. Tell yourself stories of growth, and you will become someone who grows. Tell yourself stories of powerlessness, and you will remain powerless. Tell yourself stories of resilience, and you will discover reserves of strength you never knew existed. But constructing empowering narratives is not about lying to yourself or engaging in positive thinking that denies reality. It is about choosing the most useful interpretation of events while remaining fully honest about what is actually occurring. The cancer patient who frames their illness as a battle to be won is not denying their condition. They are choosing an interpretation that serves their fight for life. The entrepreneur who views business failures as education is not ignoring their losses. They are extracting maximum value from their investment in experience. This reframing requires developing what I call the long view, the capacity to see temporary setbacks within the context of ultimate outcomes. The person trapped in short-term thinking sees only immediate pain and seeks immediate relief. The individual operating from the long view sees temporary discomfort as the price of permanent transformation. One perspective creates impulsive decisions that provide momentary comfort but long-term weakness. The other perspective creates sustainable choices that build enduring strength. The ancient Stoics practiced this long view through what they called the view from above, imagining themselves from the perspective of eternity, seeing their current struggles as brief moments in a much larger story. From this elevated perspective, today's crisis becomes tomorrow's character-building experience. This week's failure becomes next year's foundation for success. This decade's struggle becomes next century's inspiration for others facing similar challenges. But the view from above is not about minimizing your current experience or pretending that pain doesn't matter. It is about placing that pain within a context that allows you to extract meaning from it rather than being crushed by it. The meaning you create from your suffering becomes the bridge between who you are and who you are becoming. Without meaning, pain is simply pain, destructive, pointless, unbearable. With meaning, pain becomes purposeful, transformative, bearable because it serves something greater than itself. This search for meaning in the midst of difficulty is perhaps the most crucial skill you can develop, because life will provide plenty of raw material for this practice. You will face loss, disappointment, betrayal, failure, illness, rejection, and countless other forms of hardship. These experiences are not optional. They are woven into the very fabric of human existence. But how you metabolize these experiences, how you transform them from a random suffering into purposeful growth, this choice remains entirely yours. The person who learns to find meaning in adversity becomes anti-fragile, not merely resistant to damage, but actually strengthened by it. Like bones that grow denser when stressed, like muscles that develop through resistance, like immune systems that strengthen through exposure to challenges, the human spirit can learn to use difficulty as fuel for development, rather than as evidence of defeat. This anti-fragility is not built through a single dramatic transformation, but through countless small decisions to choose growth over comfort, meaning over ease, purpose over pleasure. It is cultivated in the quiet moments when no one is watching, when there are no rewards for choosing the harder path, except the internal satisfaction of knowing you are building something that cannot be taken from you. The Stoics called this inner citadel, a fortress of the soul that remains unconquerable regardless of external circumstances. This citadel is not built of stone and mortar, but of choices and character, decisions and discipline, pain consciously embraced and transformed into power. Every time you choose courage over comfort, you add another stone to this fortress. Every moment you persist through difficulty rather than surrender to ease, you strengthen these walls. Every instance you find meaning in suffering, rather than drowning in it, you raise these battlements higher. But understand that building this inner fortress is not a one-time construction project. It is a lifetime commitment to maintenance and expansion. Just as physical muscles atrophy without regular exercise, inner strength weakens without consistent challenge. The person who grows comfortable in their strength will find that strength fading. The individual who stops seeking growth will begin experiencing decay. The soul that ceases to embrace difficulty will start to fear it once again. This is why the path of conscious suffering is not a destination, but a direction. Not a goal to be achieved, but a way to be lived. It requires what the ancient philosophers called ascesis, spiritual exercise, the daily practice of choosing difficulty over ease in service of something greater than immediate gratification. This might manifest as physical training when your body resists, intellectual study when your mind prefers entertainment, emotional honesty when your ego seeks protection, or spiritual practice when your spirit craves distraction. Each act of ascesis is both a small victory and a preparation for larger battles. The person who conquers their reluctance to exercise in the morning prepares themselves to conquer their fear of taking risks in business. The individual who chooses truth over comfort in personal relationships builds the courage to stand for justice in public forums. The soul that learns to sit with anxiety without seeking escape develops the capacity to remain centered during genuine crises. This interconnectedness of all forms of conscious discipline reveals why the ancient Stoics viewed philosophy not as mere intellectual exercise, but as a way of life, a comprehensive training program for human excellence. They understood that character cannot be compartmentalized, that strength in one area of life supports strength in all areas, that weakness anywhere creates vulnerability everywhere. The modern tendency to separate physical fitness from mental discipline, emotional intelligence from spiritual development, personal growth from public responsibility reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature. You are not a collection of separate parts, but an integrated whole, and your capacity for power in any domain depends upon your willingness to embrace difficulty across all domains. This holistic approach to development through conscious suffering explains why those who achieve genuine mastery in any field inevitably discover that their success required transformation of their entire being. The athlete who reaches elite performance finds they have developed not just physical capacity, but mental toughness. The artist who creates transcendent work discovers they have cultivated not just technical skill, but emotional depth. The leader who inspires lasting change realizes they have built not just strategic intelligence, but moral character. These transformations occur because the path to excellence in anything demands that you become someone capable of excellence in everything. The same inner qualities that allow you to persist through physical training enable you to endure emotional challenges. The same mental discipline that powers intellectual achievement supports spiritual development. The same courage that drives artistic expression fuels moral action. But this integration happens only when you approach difficulty with consciousness, with purpose, with the understanding that every challenge is an opportunity to develop capacities that will serve you far beyond the immediate situation. The person who suffers unconsciously learns only to suffer. The individual who suffers consciously learns to transform suffering into strength, obstacles into opportunities, pain into power. This transformation is not automatic. It requires what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the deliberate contemplation of potential hardships before they arrive. This practice serves not to create anxiety about future problems, but to build psychological immunity to their inevitable appearance. By imagining yourself facing loss, failure, rejection, or other difficulties, you begin developing the mental frameworks and emotional resources necessary to meet these challenges with grace rather than collapse. But premeditatio malorum goes deeper than mere preparation for specific hardships. It cultivates a fundamental shift in your relationship to uncertainty itself. Instead of fearing what might go wrong, you begin to trust in your capacity to handle whatever does go wrong. Instead of trying to control outcomes, you focus on controlling your responses. Instead of seeking guarantees about the future, you develop confidence in your ability to adapt to whatever future emerges. This confidence is not born of naive optimism, but of realistic assessment of your own capabilities. When you have consciously chosen difficulty repeatedly, when you have transformed pain into power consistently, when you have found meaning in adversity regularly, you develop an unshakable faith in your resilience, not because you believe nothing bad will happen to you, but because you know that whatever happens to you, you possess the tools to transform it into something useful. This faith in your own resilience becomes the foundation for what the Stoics considered the highest form of freedom, the liberty that comes from knowing that no external force can ultimately control your inner response to circumstances. Governments may restrict your movements, economies may limit your resources, relationships may constrain your choices, but your capacity to choose your attitude, to find meaning in your experience, to grow through your challenges, this remains forever beyond the reach of any external authority. This inner freedom, this sovereignty over your own consciousness, represents the ultimate destination of the path we have been traveling together. Yet even as I speak of destinations, I must remind you that this journey has no end, only deeper levels of understanding, more refined capacities for transformation, greater reservoirs of strength drawn from the wells of conscious suffering. The Stoics spoke of the sage, the fully realized human being who had achieved complete mastery over their responses to circumstances. But they also acknowledged that such perfect wisdom might be more aspiration than achievement, more direction than destination. This acknowledgement contains profound wisdom. The path of power through pain is not about reaching some final state of invulnerability, but about continuously expanding your capacity to meet life's challenges with ever greater skill and grace. Consider what happens when you truly embrace this understanding. The things that once terrified you begin to lose their power over your imagination. The losses you once feared become simply changes to be navigated. The failures you once avoided become experiments in resilience. The rejections you once dreaded become opportunities for self-validation. The criticism you once fled becomes feedback to be evaluated rather than wounds to be healed. This is not numbness, quite the opposite. It is the heightened sensitivity of someone who has learned to feel everything without being overwhelmed by anything. Like a master musician who can hear every note in a complex symphony while maintaining awareness of the overall composition, you develop the capacity to experience the full spectrum of human emotion while remaining centered in your deepest truth. But this mastery reveals another layer of the path we explore. As your relationship to your own pain transforms, as you develop immunity to the casual cruelties and random hardships that devastate others, you begin to discover something unexpected. Your capacity to witness the suffering of others without being consumed by it, to offer genuine help without being drained by the attempt, to serve without sacrificing your own integrity. The untrained empath absorbs the pain of everyone around them, becoming a sponge for collective anguish until they lose themselves entirely in others' struggles. But the person who has learned to transform their own suffering develops what we might call conscious compassion, the ability to feel deeply for others while maintaining clear boundaries, to offer genuine assistance without assuming responsibility for outcomes beyond their control. This distinction is crucial because many who begin the path of conscious suffering become trapped in a different kind of weakness, the belief that their own development through difficulty obligates them to rescue others from theirs. They mistake their hard-won strength for a mandate to carry burdens that belong to other souls. This is not compassion, but codependency disguised as virtue. True strength, forged through conscious engagement with pain, expresses itself not through taking on others' struggles, but through modeling what is possible when someone chooses to meet their challenges with dignity and purpose. Your transformation becomes a silent teaching, your resilience an unspoken invitation for others to discover their own capacity for growth through adversity. But this modeling requires something that many find more difficult than enduring pain itself: the willingness to let others struggle, to allow those you care about to face their own necessary difficulties without rushing in as savior or rescuer. The parent who has learned strength through adversity must watch their child face age-appropriate challenges without intervening. The friend who has developed resilience through hardship must sometimes refrain from offering solutions to someone who needs to discover their own. This restraint is perhaps the most sophisticated expression of love, to care enough about someone's growth that you do not deprive them of the experiences that could forge their character. It requires tremendous faith in the transformative power of conscious suffering, tremendous trust in the human capacity to find strength through struggle, tremendous courage to love without controlling. The person who has truly integrated the lessons of pain understands that their role is not to eliminate difficulty from the world, but to demonstrate that difficulty can be met with grace. They become living proof that circumstances do not determine character, that external events need not dictate internal responses. That power can be found in the most unlikely places. This proof is desperately needed in our current age. We live in times when entire generations have been raised to believe that discomfort is pathology, that struggle is evidence of systemic failure, that any form of suffering represents a problem to be solved, rather than a teacher to be honored. These beliefs, however well-intentioned, create psychological fragility on a massive scale. The individual who has learned to find power through pain serves as an antidote to this cultural weakness. Not through preaching or teaching, but through being, through embodying the truth that human beings are capable of far more than they imagine, that resilience can be developed rather than simply possessed. That meaning can be found in the darkest circumstances. But embodying this truth requires constant vigilance against the seductive whispers of comfort, the siren songs of ease that call you back toward the familiar shores of mediocrity. Every day presents you with choices between the path of least resistance and the path of greatest growth. Every moment offers you the opportunity to choose courage over comfort, truth over convenience, purpose over pleasure. These choices accumulate like compound interest, building momentum that eventually becomes irresistible. But the inverse is equally true. Every surrender to ease, every capitulation to comfort, every retreat from necessary difficulty compounds in the opposite direction, creating momentum toward weakness, dependency, and ultimate powerlessness. The ancient Stoics understood this principle so deeply that they structured their entire approach to living around it. They developed practices specifically designed to maintain their relationship with difficulty, to prevent themselves from growing soft in times of abundance, to ensure that their strength remained sharp even when circumstances did not demand its use. One such practice was the discipline of assent, the conscious choice of which thoughts to accept and which to reject. They recognized that the mind, left to its own devices, tends toward patterns that preserve comfort rather than promote growth. They understood that without deliberate intervention, consciousness naturally flows toward the path of least resistance, seeking pleasure and avoiding pain with the single-minded devotion of water flowing downhill. The discipline of assent requires you to become an active participant in your own mental processes, rather than a passive recipient of whatever thoughts happen to arise. When faced with a challenge, your mind will reflexively generate thoughts designed to justify avoidance. This is too difficult. I'm not ready. Maybe later. Someone else should handle this. I don't have time. It's not worth the effort. These thoughts feel natural, even reasonable, because they arise automatically from the primitive parts of your brain that evolved to conserve energy and avoid danger. But the person committed to finding power through pain learns to recognize these thoughts as invitations to weakness rather than expressions of wisdom. They develop the capacity to pause, to examine these automatic responses, and to choose different thoughts that serve their growth rather than their comfort. This is not positive thinking or self-deception. It is the conscious cultivation of mental patterns that support your highest aspirations. rather than your lowest impulses. When you learn to choose thoughts that encourage courage over comfort, growth over stagnation, purpose over pleasure, you begin to reshape the very architecture of your consciousness. But this reshaping goes beyond mere mental discipline. As you consistently choose thoughts that support your development, those thoughts begin to feel natural, automatic, instinctive. The neural pathways that once led inevitably toward avoidance begin to reroute themselves toward engagement. The mental habits that once sabotaged your growth begin to support it instead. This neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to reorganize itself based on repeated patterns of activity, means that the person who consistently chooses difficulty over ease literally rewires their nervous system for strength rather than weakness. The courage that once required tremendous conscious effort begins to emerge spontaneously. The resilience that once demanded careful cultivation starts to express itself naturally. But this transformation requires time, patience, and above all, consistency. The occasional heroic gesture, the sporadic moment of courage, the isolated choice of difficulty over ease, these create temporary inspiration, but not lasting change. True transformation occurs through the accumulation of countless small decisions, each one seemingly insignificant, yet collectively reshaping the entire trajectory of your existence. The person who understands this commits to what the Stoics called the long discipline, the patient, persistent, daily practice of choosing growth over comfort in situations both large and small. They recognize that character is not built through dramatic moments, but through ordinary ones, not through extraordinary circumstances, but through common choices made with extraordinary consistency. This long discipline manifests differently for each individual, but certain principles remain constant. There must be regular exposure to voluntary discomfort, physical training that challenges your body, intellectual study that stretches your mind, emotional honesty that threatens your ego, spiritual practice that confronts your limitations. There must be consistent choice of delayed gratification over immediate pleasure, saving instead of spending, creating instead of consuming, building instead of merely enjoying. Most importantly, there must be the daily practice of meaning-making, the conscious choice to interpret experiences in ways that serve your growth rather than justify your stagnation. This is perhaps the most crucial skill because it transforms every experience, pleasant or unpleasant, into raw material for development. The traffic jam becomes an opportunity to practice patience. The difficult colleague becomes a teacher of diplomatic skills. The financial setback becomes a lesson in resourcefulness. The physical illness becomes a course in appreciation for health. The relationship conflict becomes a laboratory for communication. The professional rejection becomes feedback for improvement. This alchemical vision, the capacity to transform any experience into useful material for growth, represents the ultimate expression of power through pain. It means that nothing can happen to you that cannot serve your development if you choose to approach it with the right consciousness. Every setback becomes a setup for a comeback. Every ending becomes a beginning. Every loss becomes a lesson. But this transformation of perspective requires more than intellectual understanding. It demands what the ancient philosophers called phronesis, practical wisdom, the ability to apply universal principles to specific situations in ways that serve your highest development. This wisdom cannot be learned from books alone. It must be forged through experience, refined through practice, deepened through consistent application. The development of phronesis begins with small experiments in conscious suffering, deliberate choices to embrace minor discomforts in order to build your capacity for major challenges. The cold shower that shocks your nervous system into alertness. The difficult conversation that requires you to speak truth despite potential consequences. The creative project that demands you persist through frustration and self-doubt. Each of these experiments teaches you something about your own capacity for resilience, your ability to find meaning in difficulty, your skill at transforming resistance into strength. More importantly, They build confidence in your ability to handle whatever challenges life might present. Not because you believe those challenges will be easy, but because you know that you possess the tools to meet them with dignity and purpose. This confidence becomes self-reinforcing. As you successfully navigate increasingly difficult situations, your faith in your own resilience grows. As your faith in your resilience grows, you become willing to take on greater challenges. As you take on greater challenges, you develop greater capacity. As you develop greater capacity, you discover greater purpose. As you discover greater purpose, you find greater meaning in the inevitable difficulties that purpose requires. This upward spiral of development, through conscious engagement with difficulty, represents the practical mechanics of finding power through pain. It is not a mystical process, but a natural one, as predictable as the strengthening of muscles through resistance training or the development of skills through deliberate practice. The only difference is that instead of building physical capacity or technical ability, you are building something far more valuable, the kind of inner strength that no external force can shake, the kind of deep resilience that no circumstance can break, the kind of profound peace that no chaos can disturb. But remember, this is not the peace of those who have avoided conflict. It is the hard-won tranquility of those who have walked through fire so many times that they no longer fear the flames. It is not the happiness of those who have been spared difficulty. It is the profound satisfaction of those who have transformed every difficulty into a doorway to greater strength. It is not the comfort of those who have lived easy lives. It is the unshakable confidence of those who have chosen the harder path and discovered treasures that can only be found there. The person who commits to this path, who chooses to find power through pain rather than avoid pain through weakness, embarks on the most important journey a human being can undertake. It is the journey from victim to victor, from reactor to creator, from someone who is acted upon by life to someone who acts upon life with conscious intention and unwavering purpose. This journey has no shortcuts, no bypasses, no alternative routes that avoid the essential confrontations with difficulty that forge character. But it offers rewards that cannot be found any other way. Rewards that make every moment of struggle worthwhile, every sacrifice meaningful, every hardship a gift in disguise. These rewards are not distant promises, but present realities for those who learn to see with the eyes of wisdom rather than the expectations of comfort. They are available now in this moment, in whatever circumstances you currently face, if you choose to approach those circumstances as opportunities for growth rather than obstacles to happiness. The choice, as always, remains yours. Will you continue to seek the path of least resistance, hoping that life will eventually become easy enough that strength becomes unnecessary? Or will you embrace the ancient wisdom that recognizes difficulty as life's invitation to become everything you are capable of becoming? The Stoics knew the answer. They chose the path of conscious suffering, the deliberate embrace of difficulty in service of something greater than comfort. They found in that choice not just strength, but freedom, not just power, but peace, not just survival, but the kind of flourishing that makes life worth living regardless of circumstances. That same choice awaits you now in this moment, in whatever challenges you currently face. The path of power through pain lies open before you, ancient and eternal, tested by countless generations of seekers who discovered that the deepest treasures of human existence are hidden not in comfort, but in the conscious transformation of difficulty into strength. The only question that remains is whether you will walk that path or merely admire it from a safe distance. The answer you give will determine not just what you achieve, but who you become. And who you become in the end is the only thing that truly matters. The only thing that no external force can take from you. The only thing that death itself cannot diminish. Choose wisely. Choose courageously. Choose now. The moment arrives when theory must yield to practice, when understanding must transform into embodiment, when the comfortable distance of philosophical contemplation collapses into the immediate demand for action. You stand now at the threshold between knowing and becoming, between admiring wisdom from afar and allowing it to remake you from within. But understand this: the crossing of this threshold is not accomplished through a single heroic leap, but through 10,000 small steps, each one a choice between the gravitational pull of comfort and the magnetic draw of growth. The person who waits for the perfect moment to begin this journey will wait forever, because comfort always whispers convincing reasons to delay what difficulty demands today. There is a particular quality to this waiting, this perpetual preparation that masquerades as wisdom, but serves only weakness. I have observed it in countless souls who speak eloquently of transformation while remaining safely unchanged, who collect insights like trophies while avoiding the arena where those insights must be tested. They become connoisseurs of philosophy rather than practitioners of power, scholars of suffering rather than alchemists of pain. The ancient Stoics had a term for this condition. They called it the disease of words without deeds, the malady of those who mistake understanding for achievement, who confuse knowing the path with walking it. They recognized that intellectual appreciation of difficulty's value provides no protection against difficulty's actual arrival. The person who has read every book on courage but never acted courageously will discover when courage is required that they possess only the vocabulary of bravery, not its substance. This is why the path demands immediate engagement, not eventual commitment. Today's discomfort, however minor, becomes today's training ground. This morning's resistance, however slight, offers this morning's opportunity for growth. The present moment's call to choose difficulty over ease cannot be postponed until you feel more prepared, more confident, more ready. Readiness is not a prerequisite for beginning. It is a consequence of having begun. Consider the profound arrogance hidden within the desire for readiness. Who are you to demand that life present its challenges only when you feel equipped to meet them? What cosmic authority appointed you to determine the timing of your own testing? The universe operates according to its own schedule, not yours, and that schedule includes difficulties designed to develop capacities you do not yet possess. The wisdom of the ages recognizes this truth. You become ready by acting unready, capable by confronting incapacity, strong by engaging weakness. The alternative, waiting until you feel prepared, guarantees perpetual unpreparedness because the confidence you seek can only be earned through the experiences you avoid. But here lies a trap more subtle than the obvious cowardice of avoidance. Many who understand this principle begin to seek out artificial difficulties, manufactured hardships, designed to simulate the real challenges they hope to avoid. They create elaborate training regimens for themselves, controlled environments where they can practice courage without genuine risk, rehearse resilience without authentic consequence. This simulation approach serves a purpose in the beginning stages of development, like training wheels on a bicycle or shallow water for learning to swim. But it becomes dangerous when mistaken for the real thing, when the safety of controlled challenge substitutes for the raw encounter with uncontrolled circumstance. The person who has mastered artificial adversity may discover their helplessness when genuine difficulty arrives without warning, without rules, without the comfortable certainty that everything will turn out fine. True power emerges not from controlled exercises in discomfort, but from the spontaneous meeting of unexpected challenge with conscious response. It is forged in the moment when your carefully laid plans crumble, when your anticipated outcomes evaporate, when your prepared responses prove inadequate to circumstances you never imagined. This is where character reveals itself, not in the gymnasium of voluntary hardship, but in the unpredictable arena of involuntary adversity. Yet even as I speak of the insufficiency of artificial challenge, I must acknowledge its necessity as preparation for the real thing. The person who has never voluntarily chosen discomfort will lack the mental framework necessary to transform involuntary discomfort into growth. They will meet unexpected hardship as pure victim, unable to see opportunity within obstacle, meaning within chaos, power within pain. The art lies in using voluntary difficulty as training for involuntary difficulty, conscious suffering as preparation for unconscious suffering, chosen challenges as rehearsal for unchosen ones. But this training must be approached with the understanding that it is merely preparation, not achievement, a means to an end, not an end in itself. I have witnessed too many who become addicted to the controlled drama of self-imposed hardship, who mistake their ability to endure artificial challenges for genuine strength. They develop what I call the athlete's delusion, the belief that because they can perform well in controlled conditions, they are prepared for uncontrolled ones. The marathon runner who collapses when forced to sprint, the weightlifter who fails when asked to move irregularly shaped objects, the martial artist who freezes when confronted with genuine violence rather than choreographed combat. Life's challenges rarely arrive with the courtesy of advance notice, clear rules, or predetermined duration. They come disguised as ordinary circumstances that suddenly reveal extraordinary demands. The phone call that changes everything, the diagnosis that reframes existence, the betrayal that shatters assumptions, the loss that demolishes certainties. These moments care nothing for your training schedule, your preparation timeline, or your comfort level. The power that emerges from conscious engagement with pain must be portable, adaptable, immediately available regardless of circumstances. It cannot depend on specific conditions, familiar environments, or preferred challenges. It must be as reliable in chaos as in order, as accessible in weakness as in strength, as present in despair as in hope. This reliability comes not from mastering particular techniques, but from developing a fundamental relationship with difficulty itself, a core understanding that whatever happens, you possess the capacity to find meaning within it, to extract growth from it, to transform it into something useful for your development. This is not optimism, but pragmatism, not positive thinking, but practical wisdom. The Stoics called this capacity the discipline of desire, not the elimination of wanting, but the conscious direction of wanting toward things that serve your highest development. Instead of desiring comfort, you learn to desire growth. Instead of seeking ease, you seek meaning. Instead of pursuing pleasure, you pursue purpose. This reorientation of desire transforms your entire relationship with experience. When your deepest desire is for growth rather than comfort, difficulties become opportunities rather than obstacles. When your primary seeking is for meaning rather than ease, challenges become gifts rather than burdens. When your fundamental pursuit is purpose rather than pleasure, hardships become allies rather than enemies. But this reorientation cannot be accomplished through mere intellectual decision. It requires what the ancients called askesis, spiritual exercise, the daily practice of choosing what serves your development over what serves your immediate comfort. This practice must be so consistent, so thorough, so ingrained, that it becomes automatic, instinctive, natural. The person who has truly integrated this discipline finds themselves responding to difficulty with curiosity rather than resistance, with interest rather than aversion, with gratitude rather than resentment. Not because they enjoy pain, that would be pathology, but because they have learned to see pain as information, as teacher, as catalyst for transformation. This transformation of perception creates what I call the alchemical consciousness, the capacity to transmute any experience into useful material for development. Lead becomes gold, not through magic, but through understanding the hidden properties within lead itself. Suffering becomes strength, not through denial, but through recognition of the growth potential embedded within suffering. But alchemy requires more than desire. It demands skill, knowledge, patience, and above all, direct experience with the materials being transformed. The theoretical alchemist, who has never worked with actual substances, will produce nothing of value. The person who speaks of transforming pain, but has never consciously engaged with their own suffering, remains a philosopher of transformation rather than its practitioner. This is why the path insists upon immediate, practical, daily engagement with whatever difficulties present themselves in your current circumstances. You need not seek out extraordinary challenges. Ordinary life provides more than sufficient material for the development of extraordinary character. The question is not whether difficulties exist, but whether you will meet them consciously or unconsciously, purposefully or accidentally, as opportunities or as obstacles. The traffic that delays your schedule becomes a teacher of patience or a trigger for frustration. The choice is yours. The criticism that stings your ego becomes feedback for growth or ammunition for resentment. The decision is yours. The failure that disappoints your expectations becomes data for improvement or evidence of inadequacy. The interpretation is yours. Each of these choices, individually insignificant, collectively determines the trajectory of your development. Choose unconsciousness often enough, and you become unconscious. Choose victimhood often enough, and you become a victim. Choose growth often enough, and you become someone who grows. Choose power often enough, and you become powerful. But power, remember, is not dominance over others, but mastery over yourself. It is not the ability to control circumstances, but the capacity to remain uncontrolled by them. It is not freedom from difficulty, but freedom within difficulty. Not the elimination of pain, but the transformation of pain into purpose. This transformation requires understanding that your current difficulties are not accidents, distractions, or detours from your path. They are your path. They are precisely the experiences your soul needs to develop the qualities it seeks to embody. They are life's way of offering you advanced education in the curriculum of consciousness. The person who grasps this truth stops asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and starts asking, "How is this serving my development?" Seer. They cease demanding that life become easier and start finding ways to become stronger. They abandon the futile attempt to control outcomes and focus on the achievable goal of controlling responses. This shift in focus from external to internal, from circumstances to consciousness, from conditions to character, represents the fundamental revolution that transforms victims into victors, reactors into creators, those who are acted upon by life into those who act upon life with conscious intention. But this revolution is not a one-time event. It is an ongoing process that must be renewed daily, hourly, moment by moment. The gravitational pull of unconsciousness is constant, the seduction of victimhood persistent, the appeal of blame perpetual. Without vigilant attention to your own mental processes, you will find yourself sliding back into familiar patterns of reaction rather than maintaining conscious patterns of response. The ancient philosophers recognized this tendency and developed specific practices to maintain their conscious engagement with difficulty. They understood that good intentions are insufficient, that intellectual understanding provides no guarantee of practical application, that the gap between knowing and doing can only be bridged through disciplined practice. One such practice was the evening review, a daily examination of the day's events with particular attention to moments when they chose consciousness or unconsciousness, growth or comfort, purpose or ease. This was not self-flagellation, but self-awareness, not judgment, but discernment, not criticism, but curriculum development for tomorrow's challenges. Through this practice, they developed what we might call the observer consciousness, the capacity to witness their own responses to difficulty with the detached clarity of a scientist studying phenomena. This observer does not judge the responses as good or bad, but evaluates them as effective or ineffective for the goal of development through conscious engagement with pain. The observer notices, "When faced with criticism, I immediately became defensive rather than curious. This response protected my ego, but prevented learning. Or, when confronted with unexpected expense, I chose anxiety rather than problem solving. This response consumed energy without producing solutions. Or, when experiencing physical discomfort, I sought immediate relief rather than exploring what the discomfort might teach. This response maintained comfort, but missed opportunity for growth. These observations become the raw material for tomorrow's practice. The person who noticed defensive responses to criticism can prepare to meet future criticism with curiosity. The individual who observed anxiety in response to financial pressure can develop problem-solving strategies for similar situations. The soul who recognized the automatic seeking of relief from discomfort can experiment with sitting with discomfort to see what it might reveal. This process of observation, analysis, and conscious adjustment creates what the Stoics called prosouche, continuous attention to the present moment and the choices it contains. Every situation becomes an opportunity to practice conscious response rather than unconscious reaction, purposeful engagement rather than accidental involvement, growth-oriented choice rather than comfort-seeking avoidance. But prosouche requires more than attention. It demands courage. The courage to see yourself clearly, to acknowledge your automatic patterns honestly, to admit your unconscious choices without excuse or justification. This self-honesty is perhaps the most difficult aspect of the path, because it requires confronting not just external difficulties, but internal ones. Not just the pain that life brings, but the pain you create through your responses to life. Most people, when faced with this level of self-examination, retreat into familiar forms of self-deception. They blame circumstances for their responses, other people for their emotions, external conditions for their internal states. This blame provides temporary relief from the discomfort of taking responsibility, but it also eliminates any possibility of growth through that responsibility. The person committed to finding power through pain must develop immunity to the seductive comfort of blame. They must learn to see their responses as choices, their emotions as information, their reactions as opportunities for conscious intervention. This does not mean blaming themselves for every negative experience, but taking responsibility for their role in perpetuating or transforming negative patterns. This responsibility is not burden, but liberation. When you recognize that your responses are choices, you discover that you possess far more power than you imagined. When you understand that your emotions are information rather than commands, you gain the ability to use them as guidance rather than be used by them as masters. When you see your reactions as opportunities for conscious intervention, every moment becomes a chance to practice the art of transformation. But this art requires more than understanding. It demands embodiment. The person who intellectually grasps these principles but fails to apply them in moments of actual difficulty remains a student of transformation rather than its practitioner. The gap between theory and practice can only be bridged through repeated engagement with real challenges in real time under real pressure. This is why the path emphasizes immediate application over eventual mastery, present practice over future perfection, current choices over ideal circumstances. The moment you finish contemplating these words, life will present you with opportunities to apply them. Your response to those opportunities will determine whether you remain a philosopher of power or become its embodiment. The choice, as always, is yours. But remember this: every moment you delay choosing growth over comfort, purpose over pleasure, consciousness over unconsciousness, you are choosing. Inaction is action. Postponement is decision. Waiting for better circumstances is accepting current limitations. The Stoics understood that time is the one resource that cannot be recovered, that opportunities for growth are not infinite, that the present moment is the only moment in which transformation can occur. They developed an urgency about their own development that had nothing to do with anxiety and everything to do with the recognition that consciousness delayed is consciousness denied. The ancient philosophers spoke of a moment when all preparation must yield to presence, when all understanding must collapse into action, when the comfortable distance between knowing and being dissolves in the fire of immediate choice. That moment is not some distant future when you feel ready. It is now in whatever circumstances currently surround you, in whatever pain currently calls for transformation. You stand at the threshold between two worlds, the familiar realm of comfort and complaint, and the unknown territory where difficulty becomes doorway, where suffering becomes strength, where pain becomes the very foundation of power itself. The Stoics chose their world. The choice of yours awaits.